Okay, everyone, so you saw that the meeting is being recorded, so it's up to you whether you want to have your video feed on or off. We're totally casual here, you guys, and we're going to have fun with Tom. I am Krishna, and I'm here with Carlos and Beth, and we are the moderators of the Facebook group, Unofficial. And we're moderating the meetup today with Tom. And we're happy to have all of you here. And I thought we'd go through a little bit of housekeeping first as we're getting everybody in, just to orient you all. So again, this meeting is being recorded, and it's up to you to have the video feed on or off. We're totally casual here. Kick back, relax, maybe have a drink or two, whatever, popcorn. And you are muted by default as you're coming in. And one real important thing for you to keep in mind is you need to have the chat window enabled so we can have your participation, because Tom will be talking about a surprise bag that he has in store for us to show. We don't even know what it is. And he'll also be talking about the Trinity. So we want your questions in real time that he can answer, and we can be spontaneous about that. And just to give you a little bit of the meeting overview, we'll get to know Tom a little bit, and we'll get to also talk to him about some of the material choices that the company is going, what direction that they're going in, as well as sustainability, and Carlos will lead that discussion. We'll also, like I said before, we'll talk about some of the new designs, and then we'll conclude that with some of the questions we got from you guys from the Facebook group that we can ask Tom. And so that's a little bit of the agenda here today. And again, we're all excited to see you all. I see a lot of friendly faces, a lot of friends, and so welcome everybody. So is there anything else, Beth and Carlos, in terms of housekeeping?
The only thing, just to reiterate a little bit on what you went through, Krishna, is that the questions for Tom, I believe you already pointed it out, but just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, that all the questions when he talks about the bags and things, or any questions that you want to ask Tom, to please do it through the chat capabilities, and I will be managing that part so that I can ask Tom those questions on your behalf.
Okay, anything from you, Beth?
No, that was a very good job. Thank you, Krishna and Carlos.
Okay, great. Okay, well, without further ado, let's welcome Tom. Hi, Tom. How are you? Oh, Tom, you're muted. We'll get you unmuted.
Okay. Hey, everybody.
There we go.
Hey there.
Welcome. Good morning.
Welcome
good
to
afternoon,
you.
Good evening. Good middle of the night. Whatever you've got, wherever you are. Welcome.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you here, and we thought we'd make this meeting very casual and fun. And I was just thinking in my mind how we could just maybe be by the beach, sipping some drinks, or maybe by the pool in the backyard of a friend's house, and totally chatting up with you and having a good time. So again, welcome.
Thank you.
Perhaps by Santa Cruz, one of the Santa Cruz beaches there, Tom.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I some of you might know I was for 10 years. Well, I grew up for the first time in Santa Cruz. I've grown up a couple times since then, but the first time I grew up in Santa Cruz, and then I had a shop in downtown Santa Cruz for 10 years, from about 1990 to about 2000. And it was a lot of fun. It was like people just coming in all the time, and I was part of the downtown community, and I really miss that. Like probably more than half my friends from Santa Cruz were people that I met in my shop. So we can just make it in the shop. So, and
that's
then
awesome.
At the end of work hours, we can go over and get some margaritas, so it'll be fine.
Nice. Santa Cruz is definitely a different vibe. It's a fun place to hang out. So we all know who you are, Tom, and so without, I guess we dispense with the formal introductions, and maybe we can get you to just tell us a little bit about how you got into making and designing bags.
You know, I'm just about to turn 60. So I was born in 1960, and when I was 10 years old, I was really into hiking and wanted to get into backpacking, and I became somewhat obsessed with all the equipment that was being kind of pioneered, that sort of new generation of outdoor equipment that was coming out of significantly out of the Bay Area and Berkeley, for sure Boulder and Seattle and other places all around the world, really. But I was closest to it in the Bay Area, and I wanted all that stuff, but I was 10 years old. It was 1970, and my parents were like, well, go get a job so you can earn the money and buy it. And that didn't immediately appeal to me. So the plan B was learn to make it yourself. So I messed around sewing a little bit, and my grandmother had an old sewing machine. My brother Dan, down in Portland now, he helped me fix the sewing machine so it could run. And after that, I just started building stuff. There's a whole part of the story interwoven with a gentleman named David Meeks, who's passed away now, but he was part of that early generation of outdoor equipment builders. He was a big wall climber in Yosemite, and he settled out in Santa Cruz and was making down jackets and sleeping bags. And he was maybe 25 years old. And when I came into his shop when I was 10 or 11, he kind of, I don't know, took a liking to me or felt sorry for me or something. And he showed me a lot about making equipment, but he was also kind of a philosopher king, and his philosophy about business, about life, I adopted a lot of that. So hugely influential guy. I'm still friends with his widow down there in Santa Cruz, and we chat and text occasionally. And she came up and got to see the factory in Seattle a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's great.
Pretty cool.
Great.
So
what was Dave's influence on your philosophy of making bags and the company's philosophy with making bags, especially, I guess, for the outdoors?
You know, it's kind of interesting. His trajectory was that he, in like probably the mid 70s, I would say, he saw the direction the outdoor industry was taking in terms of it becoming lifestyle instead of technical gear. And he said, screw that. I'm not interested in that. And he didn't like that vibe and where that was going. And kind of did the only honest thing a person could do at that point and became a beekeeper and quit making outdoor equipment. So, but I think his design aesthetic was always very sparse and simple, inspired by utility. You know, he spent a lot of time in backpacking, mountaineering, and he wanted stuff that wasn't fancy, wasn't going to fail, didn't have a lot of gewgaws on it to distract you from its job. I don't know what he would think if he saw my designs now. He'd probably just chuckle to himself, but that's fine. The story that I understand is that he had just come back. No, that's a different part of the story. So back in the day, the North Face was a couple of retail stores in the Bay Area, and their products were made by a little company that you may have heard of called Sierra Designs. So Sierra Designs manufactured everything for the North Face. And at some point, I don't know the story, maybe somebody here knows it. They had a parting of company, and North Face decided they were going to make their own stuff. And as I understand it, they asked my friend David to become the first designer for the North Face. But he had just gotten his draft notice, so he went to Vietnam instead. So kind of weird. I don't think he would have been very happy in that role for very long anyway, because he was iconoclast and kind of his own guy. I don't think he would have survived in that world in Berkeley anyway. So
So Tom, so you've been making bags since 1970, I guess you was since you were 10 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
So what have you seen has changed in the bag world since then, and what has remained the same?
Well, so I was making, when I was 10, I was making more of a broad swath of outdoor equipment. I made a lot of down jackets and sleeping bags that I sold to friends. And I was making bags and backpacks too. So, I mean, specifically with bags, if you think about it, the thing that hasn't changed much is the human form. So how a backpack or bag is carried by humans. I mean, we still all have, 10 fingers and 2 shoulders and a neck. I mean, there's a bunch that didn't change. My heater just cycled. Is that bugging anybody? Can you hear that much? It's okay.
I think it's okay, yeah.
It's authentic. It's a real heater. So that hasn't changed, and the way us bag makers have figured out how to make better shoulder straps and better handles and all that stuff, that's improved. But if you really look at how people are able to carry a bag, it's either on 2 straps as a backpack or crossbody as a shoulder bag or in their hand as a briefcase. I mean, I guess you could say that there's rollerboard luggage now that wasn't around then. So wheels, but as a bag maker, rollerboard luggage isn't a bag. It may look like a bag. It's made out of fabric and has zippers, but it's a rigid box with a fabric covering. So it's a very different thing. I mean, we've dabbled in that a little bit, but we've never come up with something that we feel like would be our own interpretation of wheeled luggage that we would like and our customers would be excited by. So, but I would say that's the main thing. Lots of materials changed, but a lot haven't, I mean, you look at Cordura nylon and ballistic, pretty ubiquitous products out there. A lot of more stuff being made out of polyester than nylon now, which we do. We make almost nothing out of polyester because I don't like polyester. I don't like its performance, but there's advantages to polyester too. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I go every once in a while, I walk the outdoor retail show, the OR show. It's kind of, I guess, famous. It was in Salt Lake, or maybe I guess it was in Salt Lake for a while and now it's in Denver, and I see so many things that some of the younger new startup companies are marketing as like, this is a brand new idea. And I'm like, no, actually, Geary Outdoor did that in about 1968. Or the Sierra Designs tried that in 75 or whatever, and they were probably copying somebody else then too. So.
Oh, that's great to definitely hear your perspective on that, because those of us who haven't been in the know for as many years as you certainly don't have that perspective. So that's definitely great to hear. And we're also wondering, you're in self-isolation mode right now. You don't have the hands-on approach with the company at the factory, with the crew. And so we know you've been designing bags. We're wondering, where are you getting your inspiration? How are you getting your inspiration given the new normal situation that you're in?
I mean, we're very well connected. I mean, I'm constantly meeting with the factory staff and helping them deal with not just manufacturing stuff, but just business stuff all the time. And when I say I'm helping them, I could say I'm helping them. I'm giving them my feedback, which may or may not be valuable, right? I don't know. But in terms of my inspiration, I would almost say that I feel like I have a backlog of inspiration. I have like so many projects that got developed to a point and then I just didn't know how to complete them. And so going back and revisiting some of those things, just listening to what people are asking for. Not that I always do what I'm asked to do, for sure, but yeah, I guess I would say there's kind of a backlog of inspiration. And does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
I have, if you were here, you'd see on my shelf, I have stacks of my spiral bound sketchbooks there, which are just white. I'll grab one here. No idea what's in this one. Probably shopping lists and things to do. But these are my favorite notebooks. There's a company in Canada. I'm not sure if they're still in business. I think last time I saw them, I bought a bunch because I somehow thought they're called Eco Notes or something. And for some reason, my brain likes that they're square. And you guys may have noticed when we made our own little kind of Fisher Price size sketchbook, it's square. And for some reason, my brain just likes having it square so I can design something and then turn it 90 degrees and go, oh, it makes more sense that way than it did this way or whatever. So I don't know, there's some aesthetic thing to it. So
along those lines, Tom, Vivian was asking if you have any particular bag or accessory that you're also using during lockdown mode, in addition to the sketchpad, notepads.
What am I using? I'm hiking. I'm a kind of a weird hiker. I hike a little bit every day. I hike between 3 and 5 miles every day, sometimes often more, but that's about it. And so I have my guides pack. I always use a guides pack. I like the guides pack. I like its simplicity. What else am I using? Not getting out that much otherwise. So it's
Me too.
and in some way there's this aspect to my daily reality that makes me kind of almost an alien in the world of carrying stuff, because like when I leave the house, I have almost nothing with me most of the time. So like, when I do a serious hike, I hike almost always alone. So if I'm more than a couple of miles from a trailhead going in, I'm always carrying my 10 essentials and extra stuff and warm clothes and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty good about that. But if I'm only going out for a few miles, I might go out in my sandals, So
Nice and laid back. That's good. So Carlos, did you want to talk about the sustainability and the materials?
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of people that already buy the Tom Bin bags, they have a certain interest in sustainability and sustainable operations. And as a company, Tom Bin already being a B certified small company is a huge accomplishment. And everything you're currently doing as a company, again, in meeting the highest standards of social and environmental impact is very commendable. So can you tell us a little bit more, Tom, about what Tom Bin is doing with regards to sourcing sustainable materials for the manufacturing of the bags and accessories, in terms of the sustainability part of the materials and the supply chain process of where those materials are sourced from?
So this is something that is very much of interest to me, and is also a point of frustration, simply because there's for what we do, for the level of durability and functionality that people expect from our products, I think the materials that meet that standard are generally not sustainable yet. I mean, things are rapidly improving, and we're very much interested in whatever we can learn about that. For example, we talked earlier about polyester, and polyester resins are relatively easy to recycle, much easier than nylon is, for example. So, I mean, when you recycle your water bottle, your Coke bottle, those are all polyester resins, number one on the recycling thing on the bottom. And, it says PET or whatever they call it now. And that's polyester resin. So your fleecy jacket and those are all the same resins. Those can be recycled, maybe not endlessly, but for a long time. And that's pretty cool. Several years ago, a lot of companies, bag companies, switched over to polyester to make bags out of. It's much cheaper and it is recyclable, at least theoretically, in terms of, I'm not really clear on what the reverse supply chain of recycling finished product is, but certainly the scraps are more easily recycled. The downside to it is that if you buy a polyester backpack, it's going to last you, a fraction of the amount of time that a nylon bag will last. And in my mind, building a longer lasting product is a better thing, because it's not just the impact of the materials, it's all the cost of your supply chain of moving the materials around, moving them to your manufacturing plant, taking that finished product to the customer. There's a lot of process in that. There's a lot of carbon footprint in that. So making a bag once that you get to use for 10 or 12 years, in my mind, seems to be a lesser impactful process than making a polyester bag that's theoretically recyclable, may or may not get recycled, because of when you get to the end of your polyester backpack's lifespan, what do you really do with it? Do you really recycle it, or do you get to just feel good about 2 years ago when you bought the bag that it was going to be recycled? Does it get recycled? That's a huge thing. So that's my conclusion. We're not in a place at this point to do significantly deep audits about if my intuition about that is correct. So I do know Patagonia, for example, several years ago switched a lot of their bags over to polyester. And then I think 2 years ago, I noticed they were touting all their backpacks were now made of more durable fabric, and they had switched back to nylon. So it's a, I won't say that I can't claim that what we do is environmentally benign, particularly. Being a B Corp, we did have to meet, certain levels of, in terms of in-house recycling and all that kind of stuff. We also are now sourcing most of our fabric through a Korean mill that is Blue Sign certified. So there's a whole tracking thing involved in that, which you probably know more about than I do, Carlos. But like that's super important stuff, and we all need to be moving towards that, and we're definitely very interested in it. But so far, a lot of the materials that are renewable also just have such a short product life. That's hard for me to swallow. So
Sure.
Talk to me, Carlos. Tell me.
No, that's great.
I
No, I mean, like I said, there are a lot of things that Tom Bean is already doing that meets a lot of sustainable standards, and that, like I said, is very commendable. And as you pointed out, some of the materials are still in a very early process of this sustainability mode. So it's just going to have to be a little bit of a waiting game to find more sustainable materials per se that may have the longevity that you look for in your bags. So with that, Tom and Krishna, are we moving on to the questions from the attendees now?
Well, I just had one more or go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the mill that we work with in Korea, the Blue Sign mill, is in turn working with a fiber supplier also in Korea that is making 100% recycled nylon yarn that we are currently using in a handful of products in a 50-50 blend, 50% recycled, 50% virgin nylon. And so that's pretty exciting. That's pretty cool. Right now, the 50-50 blend was just happened to be what they initially produced at the mill, at the weaving mill, because the recycled content is significantly more expensive than the virgin content, which is in a way kind of weird, but that's, as you know, how it often is. So we're this next year, assuming we can go back to the bag business at some point and stop making cloth masks and people start buying bags again, we hope to go to 100% recycled in that product. It will boost the price of the end product a tiny amount, but it will be 100% recycled nylon. It's a type 6 nylon. They do some high tenacity treatment to it, but it doesn't perform as well as our type 6 nylons do, like what our domestic and Korean ballistic fabrics, like our 1050 and our Korean 525. It doesn't perform quite as well as those, but it's heads and tails above polyester as far as I can tell. So anyway.
So perform in terms of like abrasion resistance or? Yeah,
and for us, and this might play in well to answering some of the questions about other fabrics, all the fabrics that we don't use, right? There's a lot of fabrics that we could use that we don't. But for me, over the years, what I've come to see is that abrasion is, for what we do, abrasion is the thing that we test for and are most concerned about. If you have a nylon or whatever fabric you have that meets a relatively high abrasion resistance level, and there's a company on the East Coast called Tabor, and Tabor makes a little thing that looks kind of like an old 45 RPM record player, like I had when I was a kid. And if you don't know what a record is or a 45, ask your parents or grandparents. It looks like that, and you put a little disc of fabric on there and it abrades it, and you get to have a bench standard, a benchmark of what that abrasion resistance is. And we find that anything that survives the abrasion resistance test has more than enough tear strength and all the other properties that you want. So if it aesthetically meets our qualifications and it passes our abrasion standards, it's a golden fabric. And so we can reflect back on that if we want to talk about some other fabrics. And I'm sorry, what was the specific of your question? Say it again. Did that answer it?
Oh yeah, that totally did. Yeah. I had to remember myself. What was my question? Yeah, so we've seen that certain materials have caught on in the industry. Things like X-Pac, Dyneema, wax canvas. What are some of your thoughts on those materials?
Like I said, there's so many materials that you can use, and there's materials that enjoy these, I'm guessing maybe short-term sort of enjoy some popularity for a while, and frankly some hype around them to a certain extent. So it's kind of, in a way, it's like, why do we choose the ones we do? And then if you want to look at, you just brought up 3, for example, the X-Pac fabric, we've been looking at samples for that for decades, actually. I've been handed samples of it at fabric trade shows for a long time, and I know they've changed it and improved it a lot. X-Pac is also kind of more of a construction rather than a fabric per se, in that they bring in different fabrics and laminations and put them together into a sandwich that then, is effectively a fabric when it comes into the factory and gets turned into a bag. So X-Pac, none of the X-Pac materials that I've been around have a tactile aesthetic that I am fond of. It's kind of crunchy, and it's not, when I've been around the samples, I don't want to keep touching them. I'm like, I don't want to touch that anymore. And for me, the tactile part of it is important, because I look at our bags, and if you buy one of our bags, and hopefully you like it, and hopefully you keep using it, you're going to touch it all the time and use it and pick it up and be, moving it around. And if it has an unpleasant or unappealing tactile thing, then you may just be inclined not to use it so much. And that would be sad in my opinion. But that's, clearly that fabric and others get adopted by other manufacturers because they like that aesthetic and they speak to a customer group that appeals to them. So, no accounting for taste. It's just what I like. The other one, Dyneema. So we were I wouldn't say early, but relatively early adopter of Dyneema ripstop yarns woven into a base fabric of nylon. So that's what we call halcyon now. There's a whole weird story why we call it halcyon instead of Dyneema. And you can ask the people at Dyneema and they will tell you that story, but it's the same fiber made by a company in Japan. It's a generic ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. It's the same stuff as Dyneema or Spectra. I mean, those are all basically the same fibers. So that's what we use. And we adopted that as a lining fabric because one of the things that I noticed in bags that have a relatively heavyweight exterior fabric is that where the lining, or, we call it a lining, we don't tend to line very many things. We have internal panels that create dividers and pockets and places that retain a piece of foam to pad a back or a laptop or something like that. So you could call that a facing fabric rather than a lining fabric, or you can just call it all an inside or an internal fabric. So those fabrics don't get a lot of abrasion. So that whole thing about abrasion being the gold standard kind of flips over when you get inside of a bag, in my opinion, in my experience. So there you want a fabric that's as light as possible. But once you can make that fabric light enough so that you lose your tear strength, so that where the lining or facing pieces are sewn to the heavyweight ballistic nylon, that's a weak point. And you can actually bust those out if those seams apart and tear the fabric, the lining fabric, if it's not a really high-end fabric. So we adopted the 200 denier roughly base weight nylon fabric with the white grid. Sometimes you see it, there's some fabric, I think we use it as a gray or black grid. And it allows you to get a very lightweight fabric with a high tear strength. And for an inside fabric, that can be kind of cool. It's also just people seem to love it as an inside fabric. They like what the white grid kind of brightens up the inside of a bag. And I get that. So
Great.
We fooled around using it as an external fabric, and there's a couple of challenges with Dyneema. Dyneema melts and if I get too technical and people start yawning, just let me know. Dyneema melts at a significantly lower temperature than nylon. It's not a temperature that you're going to run into in the daily use of your product, but where that comes into play is that when you build a fabric for our industry, you tend to put a urethane coating on it, and the coating gets heat cured. If it doesn't heat cure, it remains tacky. So the urethane coating that makes your bag more or less waterproof, at least when it's new, on the inside, that they apply that to the backside of the fabric and they heat cure it. And the heat that's required to cure the urethane is higher than the melting temperature of the Dyneema or the ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. So when they first started introducing this stuff back in the 90s, I think, a lot of the outdoor industry was very excited to have a nice nylon fabric that they were familiar with this ridiculously high tear strength added by a grid of the Dyneema or Spectra yarns. But what they didn't figure out right away was that the coating didn't cure, because the coating part of the mill turned the temperature down on the urethane set, And so all these bags that were made out of those early nylon Dyneema or nylon Spectra blends, the coating would just stick to itself. So if you had one of these bags, you might put it on your shelf for the winter before you went hiking again, and then you'd open it up and all the lining pieces had stuck to each other permanently sometimes. So that's a real challenge with Dyneema. They, to a certain extent, they can overcome that with like the expat material because they're laminating, and the lamination process uses adhesives that I think are still thermally set, but at a different temperature than the urethane gets cooked onto the fabric with. So,
well, yeah, that's a lot to a lot of details with the materials. It's a lot intricacies, I'm sure, with trying to make decisions what materials to use. A lot of factors.
So with that whole coating issue, somehow the Japanese mill figured out a way to put a urethane coating that I think air dried or set at a lower temperature that worked, but they can't put it on very thick. So it's kind of adequate for a lining fabric. But when you get into like the 400D Dyneema, one of the reasons that we don't use so much of that is that the coating on it is just, in my opinion, not thick enough. And they can't make it any thicker so far. At least this is what they tell us. So anyway.
Well, okay, let's
Now, one of Krishna, real quick, I'd like to point out to Tom that he may be happy to hear the fact that going through the chat right now, there were quite a few comments from today's attendees that it is the main reason why they buy Tom Bin bags is because of their longevity in materials, that they do prefer and they align with the company's philosophy in terms of buying bags that are made of materials that will last longer, as opposed to materials that may be more recyclable, for instance, and lack of a better term. So the majority of people in the chat today do align with that philosophy, Tom.
Well, cool. I hope it's I hope you and I, Carlos, can determine whether it's the best thing for the planet or not, because I think it is, but like I say, I don't have the audit and the trail that proves that. So anyway.
Yeah,
well, we'll
so
be in touch for sure.
For all of you who don't know, Carlos has a degree in sustainability now, an MBA. So he's the expert on sustainability, everyone. So
Congratulations, Carlos.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
I guess we'll switch gears, you guys, and we'll go now, I guess, to the previews of the new designs. So what did you want to show us, Tom?
Well, the only one here that's like really showable, there's lots of weird bits and bobs. If you came into my workshop here, my design studio, there's piles on the floor and also big cardboard barrels full of partial prototypes. And it's like this, it might remind you of what like the floor of Dr. Frankenstein's operating studio looked like. It's like, there's very few whole bags. There's like a pocket or a face and a pocket on it, or some straps on a back that's been torn apart and sewn back together, dozens of times. So it could be kind of upsetting to see all these sad ripped apart bags. So this bag doesn't have a name, and it's not going to be like, the biggest technical thing ever. What this is, let me see if I can light it well enough. It's kind of sort of a new take on the Daylight. A lot of people really love their Daylight backpacks, but they use them. The Daylight was kind of conceived as a packable bag that you squeeze into your luggage, and that's it. You use it occasionally on a trip. Do you guys remember what trips were? You took a trip, you flew somewhere in an airplane?
Vaguely.
I don't remember what it was like. I've read about it though. Anyway, a lot of people seem to be using it as an everyday pack, and they like the overall style and design. So working with Nick and Darcy, I came up with this version, and then we decided let's make it sort of the guides version by adding the coyote colored straps and the ice axe loop and all that kind of stuff that I find just sort of aesthetically fun. And you know, it's also a lot, Darcy says a lot of people use the ice axe attachment for a tripod or other strapping other things onto their bag. So it has 2 strap holders on the bottom, like this Guy's Edition Synapse and Cynic do, and then the ice axe attachment. Real simple flat pocket across the front here that's big enough to fit an iPad in a relatively minimalist case. The guts are not entirely done yet. So one of the things that just so you know, when I show you prototypes that are from my studio here, I never finish the internal seams, the binding on the seams, because I'm not really set up to do that very well here. I can kind of do it, but it's also my crew in Seattle, they just know that that's going to happen. So when I show them a sample, I don't have to have that on there because it's like, that's a sine qua non. So you'll see that like on the inside of this bag, it's just a raw edge of nylon that's a little fuzzy. So I don't know, can you see that? But the black binding tape that you're used to seeing, you'll almost never see on the bags that I make here. So, so it has above the outside pocket on that same face, it's full of all the packing stuff from Amazon that you all are drowning in, right? So it has a little flat zipper pocket on the top face to orient you. That's behind the leather, fake leather diamond on the top. So, and then it's going to have, it doesn't have yet, but against the back panel here is going to have a real simple slip to put your laptop in. You know, will fit whatever the biggest Apple laptop is these days, a 16-inch, whatever it is. So, and then it has the new edgeless straps in the coyote color and a padded back. So, I mean, it's kind of simple. People might look at it and go, wow, my dad has one of those packs hanging on the wall from the 70s, or I've seen one of those in a bag museum. And it does, it's definitely evocative of a bag that Sierra Designs made back in the late 60s or early 70s called the Serendipity. That's what it was called. It was called the Serendipity. So that bag yet doesn't have a name. Oh, it also has, we're fooling around with this very hard to see label. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
So Design Lab. So this is, we're fooling around with this concept of introducing not all new products, but some new products that we're kind of like, yeah, we don't know if people are going to like this or not. We're thinking of introducing those products with the Design Lab label. And if they catch on, then they might become integral to the rest of the product line. And that whole concept was pre-COVID-19. So who knows if it's going to survive into the modern time. I found this on my workbench when I came in this morning, and I thought, well, this is actually kind of interesting because as a precursor, as part of my design process, what I'll often do is make the part of the bag that I'm pretty sure I've got an idea of what it's going to look like. And like this is this almost the same bag. Sorry, the lighting in here is so crap. It's just the shape of the bag. It has no straps. It does have a main opening zipper on the top and sides there. It has no pockets on the front. And part of my process is that I will do this in CAD, basically in a 2D pattern drafting program. I will plot out the pattern. I will cut and sew this. And then I'll take it and I'll be like, do I want a pocket there? Maybe I want a pocket there. Let's put a zipper here. Put the zipper. What does that look like? Oh, you know, that's cool, but it's too low. Let's put it a little higher. And I do this, and that's part of my process, is that I just kind of take this fake and kind of tweak with the aesthetics and go, okay, if we put that fake leather patch up here, what's that gonna, no, that's not gonna look quite right. You know, what if we put it off centered? No, that looks terrible, take that off, you know? So it's, you know, I think a lot of designers would do the same process like in Adobe Illustrator or in a CAD program, depending on what they're fluent in. For me, I like just working with the real thing in the actual shape and size that it's going to be. So
a very organic process.
it can be, yeah. I mean, there's often stuff that I will start off with. I'll have just some almost kind of a question / concept in my mind of like, well, what if, could a bag be assembled in this way? And I'll come out to the studio here with my scissors and my sewing machine, and I'll just take fabric and cut and sew and fold it out and look at it and go, oh yeah, that does kind of work. You could do it that way. And then I might even keep cutting and sewing, just abstractly putting something together and come up with something and say, wow, you know, that's really cool. The scale's totally wrong. It needs to be 150% taller and 75% the width. But the basic thing I think I'm getting close to here. So I might take it that far, take it apart, flatten out all those shapes, digitize those shapes, and then put them into my computer, digitize them into the computer basically, and then start tweaking with them, and then doing these iterative process of plotting out the parts, cutting them, sewing them, doing that whole thing over again, filling them with Amazon packing bubbles and looking at it going, eh. And a lot of the dead things laying around my workshop here are things that seem like they were going to go somewhere. And then it got to a point where I'm like going, ugh, I just don't, it's ugly and I don't know how to fix that. So there it goes. It sits on the floor. And then sometime later, I might pick it up and go, oh, I totally know what to do with that now. So.
Well, that's really cool to hear your design process like that. We're getting some comments in the chat section. Everybody's thrilled to hear how your designing process is with you. So that's awesome.
It's really fun too, because I was explaining this to this kid who came into our factory, and she said she wanted to design bags, and I was like, cool, no one ever says that. That's fun. So I spent a couple hours with this kid showing her my process, and she was like, well, don't you have to decide how big the thing's going to be, and you know how many inches wide? And I'm like, no, don't worry about that. Worry about that later. Make it look like how you want it to look. And even if you do it this big, if it looks like how you want it to do, making something this big to something this big, that's really easy. That's the easy part. It's like making it manufacturable, like so that you can take it from an idea and turn it into something you can actually squeeze out of a factory in a reasonable way. But also, you know, if you have an aesthetic goal or, you know, in mind that you're aiming for. So that, like, all the dimensions and stuff, well, that's easy. Well, is it going to fit a 15-inch MacBook Pro? Well, we can make it do that. We can stretch it this way and whatever, you know. Maybe you'll get ugly again, though. Who knows?
Well, great. So also the Trinity, so many people are very excited about the Trinity. Can you tell us a little bit about the upcoming Trinity?
Yes, I can tell you a lot of it. It's not, some of the guts on the inside of it are not completely ironed out yet. There's also some back and forth. We're hoping to introduce it in 2 sizes, and maybe ultimately make it in 3, but you know, this whole COVID thing and all that, and are people going to be traveling again, and how are they going to travel, and do they check bags? I mean, there's so many things we don't know of how soon or if ever things will get back to how they used to be. So the Trinity basically is a kind of a variation on the TriStar. So if you're familiar with our TriStar bag, which we've been making for way too long, in that it's 1, 2, 3 sections sitting next to each other, an outer section, 2 outer sections, and a center section. What I finally came up with working with YKK, the zipper company, and beating them up for a year and a half, was being able to get a zipper that's wide enough so that when you sew the bag together, you can make the center compartment, like it is on the Trinity, only incredibly narrow and thin. Because let's face it, laptops have gotten way thinner. So the goal of the Trinity is to have a very narrow center compartment with your zipper opening across the top that you get to slide your laptop into and slide your laptop out of when you go through your TSA checkpoint. If they're going to do that again, who knows? And thus keeping your laptop or device or whatever you have, which is almost always going to be, I mean, I'm sure there's customers who will say otherwise, but that's almost always going to be your densest, heaviest thing that you carry is your laptop. If you're going on a business trip, you're going to have your laptop, maybe some files jammed in there next to it, and then clothing, workout gear, whatever else you want to carry in your outer compartments. So the idea was to keep, as you carry the bag in your hand, that your laptop is dead center under that. So it's not going to hang off to one side or another as you carry it with your hand. So they all convert to backpacks like the Trinity, like the Aeronaut, but it's much more focused on a laptop solution, which I know a lot of people love our Aeronaut bag, but hate the fact that their laptop doesn't fit into it, which is totally understandable. So it's kind of an answer to that. And I was very excited to come up with a way of constructing it that kept that center compartment very thin, and the whole thing is manufacturable. And yeah, it took beating up YKK, the zipper company, a while to get what I wanted out of them.
So people are wanting to know how many liters for each of the 2 bags, roughly. And will it replace the TriStar or the Western Flyer?
The idea is that yes, it will do that. And I'm not answering a text. I'm trying to see. Whoops, it'd help if I spelled Trinity right, huh? Well, I should know that answer. And off the top of my head, I'm really bad at the cubic volume of things. The big size will be Aeronaut size, will be a more or less 45-liter bag to go head to head with the Aeronaut. So it's, and the 45 liters, the only thing magic about 45 liters is that's basically your 9 by 14 by 22 maximum carry-on size.
Right. Which
for the moment, we're assuming that in the post-COVID world, that will also be the maximum carry-on size, but who knows? Maybe they'll take that as an excuse to change that and mess with all of us bag designers.
Right. And the second size, excuse me, the second size would be roughly what, 35 liters, maybe? Roughly.
Something like that, yeah. If there's 3 sizes, there's going to be the 45-liter size, and then the middle one is bigger than a Western Flyer and smaller than a TriStar. So if you're looking at my volumes, you could tell me what that is. And then the third littlest one is going to look like it's related. They're all going to be, baby bear, mama bear, papa bear kind of thing. But the baby bear is going to be way more useful as a briefcase. And people will definitely be able to be like, hey, look, it's a briefcase I can squeeze enough clothing into to go on an overnight business trip. Isn't that great? But it's more briefcasey size. So I'm not sure I think it's small. It's definitely smaller than the Empire Builder.
Nice. Okay. Does anybody have any more questions about the Trinity? Well, maybe we can go back to the Trinity then. We can just move on. to questions that we got from the Facebook group.
Krishna?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Beth.
Oh, I was just going to say there was a good question that Jennifer Moody asked earlier, whether or not, Tom, you ever design things just for fun, that like you've never shown that you haven't, sold for the company but are using yourself.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes is the answer. And, it's interesting that actually both it's definitely a gray area, right? I definitely make stuff that I need in my own life. And I'm like, yeah, I need a futon cover and I can make one real easy because I have all the stuff to do that, right? So I'm going to make a futon cover. We're never going to sell a futon cover. That's a stupid waste of time because lots of people do that, right? But, but if you look at the history of the aeronaut and the Synapse, both of those bags I designed thinking, hey, seems like maybe people would buy them, but they're things I want. That's a bag I want. So when I travel, I want something like the aeronaut. So that's where my sketches started, was what do I want in a travel bag? So, and then we introduced it, and at some point the aeronaut was our most popular bag. It's not so much anymore. It's still quite popular. Well, again, pre-COVID was quite popular. But when we introduced it, it just fell flat. Nobody was all that interested. It took it years to catch on. And I think partly because at that time we were mostly making laptop bags and people were like, oh, whatever, travel bag. But it definitely caught on. It took a while. To a certain extent, the same thing with the Synapse. The Synapse, people were like, okay, I guess that's a cool bag. And it just caught on. But, there's other bags that we made for a while and just never caught on. So we had to take them out back. I'm trying to think of what I've done. It's a secret, so don't tell anybody. But I'm designing a really weird style, old school pullover anorak garment. So I haven't made garments for a long time, but I'm working on this thing and it's really fun. And I may never make it for anyone else, but I'm going to make one for me. And it's going to be made out of Vinteal cotton, which used to be made in the United Kingdom, and that's where it was developed. But Vinteal is now made in Switzerland, of course. So anyway.
I don't know, Tom. I think we're thinking of a new clothing line from Tom BIHN.
Yeah, the clothing world is not, that's an even tougher nut to crack than the bag world. So.
I
Yeah. I know we're very quickly and sadly coming up on time here, but just a couple comments and maybe one more question for you, Tom. Is the feedback that we have received via the chat feature here today from that backpack that you gave us a sneak peek on has been phenomenal. People are just loving that backpack, including myself here. I have to admit, it's very good looking. So I thought you'd be happy to hear that. So with that, and getting back into for the 1 or 2 minutes we have left, will the material that you're looking into that is 100% recyclable nylon, will that particular material replace the 1050 ballistic and that would be discontinued or not?
Not in the short run. It will replace the 525 ballistic, which I have to say is my favorite all-time fabric. And sadly, Invista, the company that makes those yarns, is going to discontinue it over the course of the next year. So we're already looking at the replacement of moving from a 525 to a 630 denier in the same exact construction. And so far, well, almost the same exact construction. And so far, they're hard to tell apart. So that's pretty happy about. And what's kind of cool about that is that the 630 denier yarn is the yarn that is available as 100% recycled yarn. Again, it's not a high tenacity nylon, so it's not going to have quite the high abrasion resistance that we get out of our high tenacity are type 6.6, in this case 525 and 630 and 1050, but it's a good performer. So it's really going to depend on the availability of that and how that plays out. Like we would have gone whole hog on the, right now you see on our website, we do a 630 single ply weave. That's the 50/50 blend. And we love it. It's a nice fabric. It doesn't, the Tabor test abrasion is very good, but not quite as good as our other fabrics that we're used to. But we kind of just wanted to see it out there in the world for a while and not switch everything over to it to find out that it fails in a way that we hadn't even expected. Like somehow recycled nylon hates urethane and the urethane falls off in 2 weeks or something. We're just like, wow. Hey, you just don't know. You want to have that track record before you go whole hog. So I think the bags that we did do in the recycled thing are like kind of more everyday bags, not so technical bags like that. So just thinking the expectation for total abuse it forever kind of thing wasn't quite so high.
Got it. And I guess we can close out with a question. There were quite a few fans of Parapack, and they were wondering if we will see additional Parapack collars coming from Tom BIHN.
Oh, that's nice. I love Parapack. Parapack is just such a classic. I mean, it is. It's developed for the military, like back in the 60s or something, right? I don't know. I don't know what the future of that is. Right now, we get a US Parapack. That's a 420 high tenacity 6.6 nylon woven in a single ply construction. We're gradually phasing away from our US mills because frankly, they are just really difficult to deal with. And the South Korean mill is much more interested in our business. They're living fully in the 21st century. In all honesty, the US mills are way behind. But they can do that same fabric in a way that you would never know that it's not US product. And they can actually do some tricks to it, like twisting the yarns that we're getting into on some of our other fabrics. So, but that's nice to hear that people are really love the Parapack fabric. And my goal would be if we do bring it back, we bring it back in a way that has the same aesthetic and hand and, the sparkle or heather or whatever that magic thing is that 420 Parapack has, that has all of that, but performs even better because, it does scuff, as does our 525. That's kind of the trade-off when you go from a what is called a filament yarn, like our ballistics and the Parapack fabrics, as opposed to a texturized yarn like 1000D Cordura and 500D Cordura are texturized yarns. And those texturized yarns, they're basically a lot of the filaments that are pre-broken. So they not only the broken filaments on the surface that make it slightly fuzzy, those absorb energy of abrasion so that it doesn't break the yarns that are not broken. But it also, when yarns do break, you don't see them because the outer surface is already fuzzy. So that's why Cordura is such a popular fabric. And when I say Cordura, I mean that old school texturized yarn, which people do, a lot of the mills do in a polyester, and they do it in an off-brand nylon. So it's, when I say Cordura, I'm meaning texturized yarns. They collect pet hair like nobody's business. And that's why we are shying away from them. Because, in my life, I set a Cordura bag down at my doorstep and I pick it back up and it's got half a dog's worth of hair on it. And that gets tiresome, but it has a lot of other advantages. So, and if you guys want to stay for a few extra minutes to answer questions, I've got a little time, but if people want to wrap it up, and we'll just do this again sometime.
If you want to answer, let's say, one more question, people want to know if anyone else in the company doodles on ideas for designs besides you, the snake or anyone else, or are you the sole designer per se?
Nick does more and more stuff, and Nick has been instrumental in making like the Cynic happen. So he's, you know, I think he's kind of, you could say, coming up under me or studying from me, and part of that is like tweaking existing designs, tweaking and like taking the Synapse and turning it into the Cynic. So, and I'm not really sure what his process looks like. He's off doing that somewhere else. So I know I see him sewing samples and stuff. So he's like me, he's making prototypes.
Nice, nice. Well, with that, Tom, you have been very, very generous today with your time, with sharing your, part of your story, sharing some of the designs that you're working on and your design process as well. So we thank you tremendously for that. It's been a tremendous, tremendous pleasure to have you with us today. Hopefully we can do it again. That would be awesome. And
yeah, as long as you think I've behaved myself appropriately.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And thank you, Beth and Krishna and Carlos, for putting it together. It's been really fun. And thank you all for your continued interest in what I do and what our company does, because I would do it even if nobody bought it, because I like doing it. But it's a lot more fun to see the bags out there getting used and getting feedback.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Sure, yeah. For sure.
So
thank you, Tom, so much for coming and spending time with us.
It's a pleasure, really. So maybe I'll clean up the shop next time. Won't be so bad.
Yeah. And thank you everyone who attended this meetup as well. Thank you for your participation and a lot of the great questions. So, we'll hopefully do this again.
Yeah, and we can focus more on questions. Like I see the questions spinning by, and I'm like, oh, never mind. So we'll do that more next time.
For sure.
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.